Good morning, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to AXA Coral Live. It is really wonderful to have you all with us. We are broadcasting live from the island of Curacao, and that is in the southern Caribbean, and we are at the Kamabi Research Station. Today's live lesson is all about a career in science, and in particular coral and marine science. So really looking forward to discussing that in just a bit. Looking forward to all your amazing questions. Please send those in. We've got some pre-submitted, but you can post them live on the live lesson page as well. Now, I've mentioned this word or this term, research station, and that's where we're based for the 2 weeks of Coral Live. It's where scientists can have some laboratory space and bedrooms and kitchens and all that kind of thing, but also be near the coral reef, the place that they are studying. So scientists who come and visit here for maybe 2 weeks, 3 months or even longer can explore the underwater world, have access to all the dive equipment that they need, and then start to look at some of the samples that they collect on the reef, whether that's water or measurements or little bits of sponge, and look at them a bit more closely back in the labs here. But it's with great pleasure that we are going to welcome to AXA Coral Live, to this Meet a Coral Scientist live lesson, two scientists at the beginning of their career. Versa and Lisa, a big welcome to Coral Live. Thank you so much for being part of this. As we've been talking this morning, and as I've mentioned earlier, this live lesson is all about being a coral scientist. To give a taste to the classes watching, and in fact we can say a big shout out to some of those classes. We've got year 5 at Clifford Primary School, so we can give them a wave. Hi to everybody there. We've got a very proud mum of Elsa and Louis who are learning all about coral. So Elsa, Louis, good morning. Hi. Morning. From Kamabi in Curacao. And a big shout out to class 3 at Atelier 21 Future School, and their topic this term is the ocean and why we should save the oceans. Fantastic topic and great to have you with us. Hi to everyone there. Thank you so much for being part of Coral Live. Can you give a taste or a sense of what are the highlights of being a coral scientist? What are some of the wowiest things that you've encountered here on Curacao? Who shall I start with?
I can start.
Let's go.
I think my most craziest and wowest day for me was when we went for the first time on a boat. We were collecting water samples. We wanted to know what's in the water here, actually behind us. And there was like 8 of us plus captain, and we were just all around the place, but we all knew what to do, so it was very interesting. We were using different measurement devices. We were just going out, and now there are no waves, but back then there were big waves, so it was very adventurous, and I really liked that.
And Lisa, what was it for you?
Oh, I would say the differences in the coral reefs that I've seen here. I mean, Curacao is not a really large island, but the reef is so different depending on where you go. We were on a boat to East Point once, and the reef there is just massive, and the really big fan corals moving were just amazing.
Wow.
Like, we're talking really big corals, and then you go to another side and the reef looks completely different, although this is quite a small island.
I mean, that sounds just amazing, that teamwork, almost like being a sort of sports team, everyone knowing their different roles, and then being in this amazing environment, the huge sea fans and probably elk horns and everything else. Absolutely incredible. We're going to sort of break down for classes a little bit about what being a coral scientist involves, because it's marine science, like you just go and swim with dolphins or you just go and swim amongst the coral reefs, which sounds great. We're going to look at some of the equipment that you use, explain, I think, two halves. The first half being the dive equipment so you can be underwater, and then the science kit that you use to study the underwater world. Should we start over here? Well, what have we got here, Bertha?
So, well, we need to breathe under the water.
Okay.
So this is one part of the equipment to breathe. So you put this in your mouth and you breathe, but you need to get air. So we need to have a tank where there you have air that is connected to this, and then you breathe. And we also have this is attached to it, which actually tells you how much air you have left. So this is one part, and in order to float, we need to have this jacket, which is also filled with air, depending on how much you want to float up or down or be stable. Another thing attached to this is the compass, so you don't get lost.
So just to go through some, this is a dive tank or an air tank.
Exactly.
And what is this called? Is this a regulator or something?
Yes, exactly.
So regulator, so that regulates the amount of air that's coming in, because it's all sort of quite squashed in there. Mm-hmm. For those teachers wanting to write that on the board, that's regulator.
Exactly.
Excellent. Amazing. And then what was the float up and down piece? That was a BCD? BCD. Exactly. So we can call it a BCD, there's capital letters. And what does that stand for? Is it? I think it's a buoyancy control device.
Yes, exactly.
Excellent. So it controls how buoyant you are. Absolutely. That's very, very cool. So that means you can be underwater. How then do you do science underwater? What are the things that you need to do science underwater?
Maybe I go first. So for my science, I need some water samples, because I'm looking at all the invisible things underwater, the tiny microbes that you can only see under a microscope, and substances.
Okay.
So tiny molecules, everything invisible.
Everything invisible. And so how do you go about collecting that when you're underwater?
I will have a big bottle of water that I will take down, or a tube that I can close to collect water at the certain depth I want, so right above the reef, and one at the surface actually. And I will bring this home then, and then run my filtrations. Okay,
so you're collecting in a collection bottle. I can see some things here. What are all these bits and pieces?
So one way to collect the water is with this Siren. So you're under the water and you just take the water.
That simple. Okay, brilliant. And then you're then coming back to Kamabi, to the laboratory, and then you are filtering. Do you say filtering the water?
So I can actually demonstrate that in a bit.
Okay.
I'm just taking the microphone. Just gonna quickly grab a bit of water.
Oh, well, this is science in action here. Okay. So what we're doing here, Lisa's just collecting some seawater. Normally this would be nearer the reef rather than just at the edge of the shore.
Sure.
And then what happens now?
So I normally have that in my sample bottle that I got directly from the reef.
Uh-huh.
And I have my filtration unit in the lab. And I'm actually have these little filters here.
Okay.
That are collecting all the very tiny microbes in there.
And microbes are bacteria,
Yeah, bacteria, viruses,
all that kind of thing.
all the tiny organisms that they
Okay.
are. And then I can actually hook that up here in the water with normally the pump I have in the lab will just pump the water through here and it will drip out of the filter.
So this is like a very, very fine sieve.
Yes,
Okay.
actually 0.2 micrometers, which is super, super tiny.
So that's a fifth of a millionth of a meter. Okay, that's
Yeah.
small. That's small.
And this is, so to say, for all the microbes, the bacteria, the biological parts, and I also have the substances part, so the tiny little molecules that we have in the water or that get run off from land in the water. And therefore I have this little cartridge here.
Uh-huh.
And actually this part here with the little substance here is just holding on to all the tiny molecules that we have in the water. And I pre-filtered everything here, got my biological bacteria, viruses, and
So, I mean, just for those young people watching, I think it can be very easy to think that when you have water, it's just water. And then when we have seawater, it's water but with some salt in it. But there's a huge amount of different things that can affect
yeah, definitely.
the health of the reef, and you're finding out where and what they are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like with the molecules, it's like if you have a sugar cube and
Yeah.
then you put it in water, there is still sugar in it. You don't see the sugar cube anymore. And these are all these tiny molecules that you can't see anymore.
Brilliant. Perfect. That's amazing, Lisa. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm slightly confused here. Is that it looks like you're playing ping pong underwater. What's this ping pong ball all about?
Yeah, so well, sometimes we play ping pong, but sometimes the water plays ping pong with us. So if we have waves, then the water also moves with the waves, moves back and forth, and we want to visualize that. We want to see it. So we use GoPro to record the movement of the water that is moved, like as the ping pong ball moves around the coral reefs. So we want to see how different the flow is around the corals. The corals also make a difference. It's like city, you know, the wind around the city is moving differently than in the desert where there is nothing around us.
Okay, so I mean, on land we would be looking at wind and how that brings different substances around the world, and then it's super important. So we've got Lisa looking at what's in the water, and you've got looking at how that water then moves around the coral reef. What I find really interesting about marine science is that a lot of it is super simple. We have this idea, well, in terms of the equipment, we have this idea of sort of like having lots of test tubes and everything sort of crazy sort of science look, but we've got taking photographs of a ping pong ball or using a sort of big tube to collect water and then to filter it. It's absolutely fascinating. What are these other bits we've got here? It looks like you're gardening now and taking notes.
Yeah, so we also want to see what kind of sediment we have. So sand, anything smaller than sand, and what's in there. So we also, while diving, we also take some sand and we collect it either in the Ziplocs or in some other tubes, and then we analyze it later on.
Brilliant. And so what's a typical day like? Is it just filming underwater ping pong balls or diving all day? I mean, what would be a typical day as a coral scientist?
Yeah, usually it starts the day earlier when we prepare everything for the next day, because we want to go early in the morning. So a typical day would be we have everything pretty much prepared the day earlier. Mm-hmm. We wake up have breakfast, of course, go to Kermabi, to the research station, and collect all of our devices, of our bottles that we want to take, of our diving gear, and drive to the location where we want to go diving and collect the samples.
Brilliant. And the diving takes all day, or I mean, it's about sort of what? Get up at 6?
Yeah, we normally do 2 dives till around lunchtime. So we get back and we store all our samples, all our gear here at the research station. Then probably have a bit of lunch before we get starting, and then everyone from the team is processing their samples individually because we're all looking at different parts of the ocean. And then in the end, when we're all done, we normally reconvene, bring all our knowledge together, talk about how the day and the sampling went, all the good and bad things.
It sounds like a pretty amazing sort of thing to do every day. Do you spend all of your time as a scientist on an island diving and collecting samples, or do you then have to go back to a university and do some more research and more sort of like office-y type work?
Definitely. Yeah, so a big part of our research is also just going back to our institution or university and actually, like now we're just collecting the samples, but we want to know what the samples show us, what is the results of this, so we need to analyze everything. Then we got some results, we write papers to let others know what we found.
Brilliant. And it sounds fascinating. I've got an understanding of the kit, I've got an understanding of what it does, what you do during the day. How did you get to be here? Because it looks like not a bad place to be. So going back to your childhood, was this always a dream to be a scientist or to work with the ocean?
Okay. Yeah, as a kid, I grew up in the mountains. So it's quite interesting how I ended up here. But as a kid, every summer with my father, we went to the seaside. And these are one of my greatest memories. We went snorkeling, we saw seahorses, we collect shells, we went on a boat, saw the dolphins, and all of these things just made me feel good. So once I just realized, like, why don't I spend the rest of my life doing things in a more professional way, of course, but being next to the ocean. And that's how I ended up here.
Lisa, what was it for you?
Actually, all started with having scuba diving as a hobby when I was in primary school, maybe 3rd grade approximately.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool. Primary school. I don't think I had that.
I was just always in the swimming pool with my parents, and then I saw people having scuba diving lessons there, and I'm like, okay, wow, there are people underwater, breathing underwater, that's so cool, I want to do that. And it kind of developed into a hobby, and then later on I'm like, okay, I can also work with that. There is scientific diving, there is marine research, maybe that's something for me, and then the journey continued.
and when you both have had these sort of like breakthrough moments where you've gone, wow, there's an underwater world to explore. What did that mean for how hard you worked and what you studied at school?
Well, it was definitely a challenging journey, but at the end it's all about going for it, making the right decisions, or just if there is an opportunity, taking it. So of course you have to go to the university, do undergraduate and graduate degree, so bachelor and masters, and then look for opportunities to study more.
But for both of you, and maybe Lisa first, what have you found most challenging during this journey from being at primary school, becoming a professional scientist in the Caribbean?
I mean, the most challenging towards the school time is, of course, like not every subject is my favorite subject. And in the end, applying for university, they look at all the grades. So actually, although one is not interested in all the subjects, they're all important. And I struggled a lot. I knew I wanted to study biology, and I first did not get admitted to university, but that's not the thing. Then just search for an option to still continue the path. I think that's the most important, to not get discouraged by anything if that's what you want to do.
And Lisa, that sounds amazing, but how did you, because I know there's going to be a lot of young people watching who come up with, you know, these obstacles, these barriers in life. What took you from not getting into university the first time to reapplying and making your dream come true? What was that like, and what?
I mean, I have that passion, and I knew marine science that's what I want to do, and I just choose different options. There's always a plan B, to maybe do an internship, to wait for the semester it takes to get in, or something like an apprenticeship towards biological, technical, lab assistant, something like that. There is always some way to still continue.
So the road is, if you have a dream, the road is not always straight, but stick to it. Keep on going. And just to look at the different stages of becoming a professional scientist. I mean, Lisa, you've spoken about not always enjoying everything, but knowing that it's important to achieve your dreams. What did you choose to study at university, sort of straight from school?
I actually chose physics at first because, well, as I told you, I grew up in the mountains, so where I grew up, we didn't have an option to study marine sciences, but physics was the closest to it. So I just started there, and then I realized, okay, this is a way to go, but let me find a way to get a bit closer. So I continued studying water sciences. And after that, I actually moved to a country where there is a lot of sea and where you can study the ocean. So it was also not straightforward, but there was always in the back of my mind to find a place to study marine sciences.
And then, so you do an undergraduate degree for 3 or 4 years, and then you do a master's, is that right?
Yes.
So an advanced degree. How long does that take?
The master's?
Yeah.
2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years, so that's about 6 years already.
Yeah, depends a bit on the track, yeah.
Okay, and then you're doing a doctorate, a PhD, a really advanced degree, and that's another 4 years?
Exactly.
Yes,
So you've
it's a
got
long
10
time.
years of study.
Yeah.
And what does that feel? Because that for me feels like a really long time. How does that feel for you? Does it feel like it's turning into a more independent job where you can explore and do things?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's not only studying. I mean, it is studying, but by studying, you're already doing marine sciences. So I think for me, it was always also doing what I love to do. So passionate things like studying the ocean. And we're still learning. We are always going to learn, even when we are independent researchers.
I mean, it sounds fascinating. We've got a whole heap of questions coming up. But before we get to those, what are the qualities that you think you need to do your job? What kind of things?
I think the first and most important one is being curious.
Okay.
Always keep asking questions. That's, I would say, my top one.
Curious, okay.
Yeah, I would say collaboration with others. So you're always working also with other researchers, and you want to talk to them. You want them to let know what you're doing. So just good communication.
So I've got communication, curious, teamwork.
Definitely.
Anything else?
Patience.
Yeah, patience, definitely.
Okay, so from that laughter I can tell that quite a few things probably go wrong. Is that right, or don't quite work the way
That's
you
part
want?
of it.
It's part of the job.
It's always a learning curve.
Brilliant. Well, let's get down to some of the questions coming out, and that we've got. Although this is a meet the coral scientist, more of a careers focus live lesson, we have the most amazing spread of questions about everything to do with coral. So we do have some speakers later this week which we can refer to as we go through them. But first off, we've got Richard, who has asked, how fast does coral grow?
That's
It
a good
depends.
question. Exactly, yeah.
So Richard, it really depends on the type of species. So we tend to find that the branching corals around the world tend to grow faster, just the way they're designed, and the bolder corals tend to grow slower. So you can get a staghorn coral, I think, growing sort of 10 to 15 centimeters a year, and then some of the more bouldery corals maybe just a centimeter or two a year. But it really depends on the species and on the health in the ocean around it. It's a bit like asking, how fast does a plant grow, and there's huge range there. So if you water it properly, it's going to grow faster. If it's a bamboo, it's going to go super fast. So but great question, Richard. This is a lovely question. This is both from Naomi in Dover College and Monet at Clifford Primary, and it's asking, what does coral do? What does it do?
Yeah, it's like really important for the reef health, because the coral reef always sounds like only coral, but it's also more than the coral. There's benthos in the reef, and it provides benthos for sponges.
Sponges, okay, cool.
Another benthos, so like organisms that are staying on the reef. And the reef is also really important for fish as a habitat, so it's a place to live where they can hide, get food. So I think like the habitat is really important.
Yeah, I find it amazing that it's one of the sort of animals that makes a 3D structure for other animals. I think it's very, very, very cool. Great question there from Naomi and Monet. We've got the next question from Johnson. Is plastic dangerous to turtles, and can they die? I don't know where you are on yes. Yes, plastic is dangerous to turtles, and yes, they can die. In fact, I think the turtles are one of the worst impacted
I mean,
types of
there is
animal.
difference between like the big pieces of plastic, they can get entangled in plastic bags, for example, but also just that they take in all the microplastics. If the plastic in the ocean try to degrade, there's still very tiny invisible or rarely visible chunks of plastic, and animals ingest that, so take that in, and it's not really good for their body.
And even ingesting sort of larger bits of plastic which are blocking their guts. So really a big message there. Love turtles, hate litter.
Yeah.
We can do more on plastics in another series, I think. The Atelier 21 school would like to know, can coral be poisonous to humans? Well, we've got. I mean, you don't want to touch the fire coral.
Exactly. Exactly.
So there's fire coral, which is venomous rather than poisonous in terms of it, the stinging cells going for it. There's other toxic. There are some other toxic species of coral, the zoanthids. I'm not going to get deep into coral biology, but yes. But we should be really careful with corals, not because they sting, not because they can be poisonous, but because they're so important to nature, humans, and all life on our planet. I think that we'll let's see what we've got coming in. We have Logan, this is a great question. Logan would like to know, have you ever met a shark while doing your job?
I didn't.
Not during the job. For
But you have
fun,
met a
for
shark.
fun diving, I've seen a few sharks already.
How does that feel? Is that as scary as it may sound?
I would say it also depends on which kind of shark it is. When like the reef sharks during a diving trip that I had, and they're actually can be quite big and intimidating, but it's also just a really great experience. So it's a rather positive experience for me.
Okay, positive experience about meeting a shark underwater, Logan. You heard it here first. Year 4 at Hillcrest Academy. What's it like to be based at a research centre, to live sort of away from home here?
It's actually really nice because we are surrounded with other students, other researchers, and it's a lot of fun. We are sharing the same passion, and that's super nice to be surrounded by this kind of people. So, yeah.
And just having like some casual conversations about our different disciplines, because it's always important to keep talking. For example, with Vesna's things with how everything flows might be important for me, and the molecules to know where they're going later on. So collaboration is a big thing.
I think that's really right. Whenever I've visited the research station, it's almost those sort of lunchtime, mealtime conversations which just add so much to what you're
so
doing.
many things you haven't thought about that someone else like, oh, what about this? And you're like, oh, that's great input for me, or you have some input for other people. It's always great to keep communicating.
Brilliant. From Elsa and Louis, we have a wonderful question, is what is the best thing about your job?
I think being in the water or on the water, just doing it's so diverse, and I think that's the best thing. One day you're diving, next day you're on a boat, third day you're talking to your colleagues. It's so diverse. For me, that's the best.
Yeah, having these different trips out, seeing Curacao and the underwater life here, and then the different things we do here, but also at home. One day it's being in the lab, one day is analyzing on the computer, and it's just very diverse what we do, and I love that.
Brilliant. We've got, wow, there's so many questions here. Global warming, this is from Noah, great question Noah. Global warming is affecting coral reefs. Is there anything that we can do about it?
Definitely. I mean,
It's a tough one.
It's a tough one, but in general, every individual has to think about their own, what they do. So think about your footprint. So it's, how much do you use? Do you go by car, or can you go by bus, for example? Can you bike maybe? That's just one of the examples.
I mean, there's so much. So I think when people think about global warming and coral reefs, they may be thinking, is there something specific that I need to do that's coral reef? But as you're saying, I think both of you agree, is that anything you do to decrease emissions where you are is also going to be helping the reef.
Yes.
Amazing. Lovely. We've got this is a great question. This is from Ronnie at Holton St Peter School, and Ronnie would like to know how old were you when you started scuba diving?
Me, I was quite old. I was 21 years old. I was mainly snorkeling before that, but yeah, I was quite old.
It's over 10 years ago.
Okay.
Hard to relocate that. I knew I did my first license actually with 12, but I've
12.
been in the diving club and do some junior scuba diving a few years before that.
Oh wow. So, but I mean, for you, but doing your job, it hasn't been, being whether 12 or 21.
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
matter.
never too late. I also know
Exactly.
people way older to still learn scuba diving, so if someone's interested, it's never too late.
Thank you so much. Here we are. Look at, and this is one of a question just about travel. Obviously, you're both based in the Netherlands at the moment. How much time do you spend overseas as part of your sort of 4-year doctorate, your 4-year university study?
Yeah, it will be a couple of months per year. So now we're here for a month, but we're gonna come back next year for at least 2-3 months in spring and also in autumn. So it really depends. When we know we have to do something here, we have to do field work, we pack our bags and go.
Yeah, it's being flexible is one of the most important things too.
And then towards the end, you'll be mainly writing about what you've been finding out. Okay,
exactly.
so the front is let's go and explore. In the middle, it's let's sort of study things, what we found a bit more, and then you've got to write about it.
Yes.
at the
Yes.
end. Desti would like to know why are they, and I think meaning Coral. I hope Desti, in fact, I'm going to ask Sim, who's moderating all these questions back in London, if I can get a bit more clarity on that question, just so we know what we're talking about. But we've got Elsa and Carmela at Dover College, who would like to know what is your favourite reef animal?
Ooh, my favorite reef animal. I think it goes towards the sea turtle.
Sea turtle?
Yeah.
Any particular reason, or just because?
Just because they're really beautiful, but I don't really like picking favorites because there's so many beautiful and magnificent animals there. So
Brilliant.
It has to be a flying fish because I think it's like a super. It has superpowers. It can swim and also fly at the same time, and I think that's just great.
We've just got time for a few more questions. We've got from Bella. Great question, Bella. Is how do you feel when you get into the water, when you go beneath the surface? What's that feeling like?
I would say it's the most relaxing feeling. I mean, it's also work related, but it's just, I don't know, it makes me really calm and relaxed to dive.
Exactly. It's relaxing. It's suddenly quiet. Of course, you hear your own breathing and some other things happening in the ocean, but it's a different kind of quiet. So it's very nice.
Very nice, because I know it's not silent down there. You've got the sort of Rice Krispies noises on the reef, the sort of popping and crackling and everything. Amazing. We've got Desti's question to come back, and then we have, what is the most common sea animal that you see? What's the most common sea animal? I can think probably two. Sponge and coral.
Yeah, definitely.
So I whispered that, but what would you say were the most common?
Yeah,
Sponges,
coral
corals,
and the little reef fish also.
a lot of fish here in Curacao.
So for those of you who didn't know at home and in the classroom, sponges are animals. Sponges and corals an animal too. We're going to try, for some reason, the questions have gone offline, but we have that last question from Desti, and we're going to answer it as if he's talking about coral. Why are corals in so many colours and so many shapes? I think it's probably a bit like plants, really, isn't it?
Yeah. They're all just very diverse, all a bit different.
They also need to attract fish.
And that's also they'll grow in different places which have different properties. Like we see smaller plants in the mountains, we see smaller coral where there's a lot of wave action on,
Yeah.
you know, so there's lots of difference. And in terms of the colour, there isn't that much variety of colour in corals. It's sort of all browns and yellows and greens and that kind of colour. If you see something really bright on the reef, it's probably a sponge. It's probably a sponge. Lisa and Versa, thank you so much for being part of Coral Live. Thank you to everyone watching for your amazing questions. We're back tomorrow to look at food chains, and then we're really focusing in on caring for coral on Friday, and I know that we touched on that in some of the questions. But thank you, and really just a big thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
For
Thank
being
you.
part of Coral Live. And it's a big goodbye
Bye.
from Curacao, and really amazing to have you all part of it.